What if your skin color alone could land you in prison? Imagine working day and night to build a future, only to be accused of a crime you didn't commit by a billionaire who thinks your life is disposable. This is the unbelievable true-to-life story of Nicholas Okafor, a Nigerian janitor who was thrown behind bars, not for what he did, but for who he was. Betrayal, injustice, and the power of truth. Stick around, because what you're about to see will make you angry, inspired, and maybe even tearful. This isn't just a movie, it's a message. Let's dive in. Nicholas Okafor stepped out of the airport terminal and into a foreign world, cold air biting at his cheeks, a sky too grey for comfort, and strangers who barely looked twice at him. 34 years old, Nigerian, a visa in his pocket, and only one thing pulsing in his chest: hope. He'd left behind his wife, Adaora, and 2 little children with eyes too wise for their age. He'd promised them a better life. Now he was here to keep it. The first week was a blur of worn-out shoes and rejection. No one wanted to hire a foreigner with a thick accent and eager eyes. Until finally, a janitor job opened up in a towering corporate skyscraper downtown. The pay was meager, the hours brutal, but Nicholas didn't complain. At night, he scrubbed tiled floors under fluorescent lights, while suits walked past him like he was part of the wallpaper. He bowed his head and worked. The stares came often, cold, judging, some even laced with subtle disgust. Sometimes it was a muttered comment, other times just the way someone clutched their bag tighter around him. But Nicholas had learned early that silence was its own form of strength. So he held on. With every shift, every mop swipe, he told himself it was worth it. Every Friday, he stood in line at the money transfer kiosk, sending every extra naira home. For school fees, he'd tell Adaora on the phone, his voice soft with fatigue but firm with love. For food, for our future. He missed them fiercely, but he told himself over and over, suffer now, rejoice later. He didn't know it yet, but that belief would be tested in ways no man should ever have to endure. By the second year, Nicholas was barely sleeping. Mornings at the gas station, afternoons wiping down greasy counters as a kitchen hand, nights sweeping stairwells in high-rise buildings that glowed with lives he couldn't afford. But he endured, always with a smile, always with a whisper to himself. You didn't come this far to break now. Then one lucky morning, his calm voice and patient manners landed him a spot as a receptionist in one of the city's fastest-growing tech corporations, Langston Innovations. It was a massive step up. Clean desk, shirt and tie, a name tag that said Mr. N. Okafor instead of custodian. But behind the polished glass doors sat Gregory Langston, CEO, billionaire, and king of biting comments. Gregory was everything Nicholas was not: rich, white, loud, entitled. He wore his arrogance like cologne, and no matter how respectful Nicholas was, it was never enough. You people are always so eager to please, Gregory once said offhandedly, smirking as if it were a compliment. Nicholas swallowed the insult like bitter tea. He couldn't afford confrontation, not when he was finally sending double the money home. He kept his head down, memorized phone extensions, handled visitor requests with grace, and acted like he didn't hear the jokes whispered just out of earshot. But each time he smiled through the sting. Each time he bowed slightly to avoid eye contact, something inside him tightened. A quiet storm was building beneath his still surface, and soon it would have nowhere left to hide. The office was quieter than usual that night, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Nicholas had just finished cleaning the executive lounge, his last task before clocking out, when a loud thud echoed through the marbled corridor like a gunshot. He rushed toward the sound, heart pounding. At the foot of the grand staircase that spiraled through the center of Langston Innovations headquarters lay Gregory Langston, blood trickling from his temple, limbs sprawled unnaturally. Nicholas froze. For a split second he thought maybe Gregory had slipped. Those polished marble steps could be treacherous. He reached into his pocket for his phone, hands trembling, and dialed emergency services. "It's Mr. Langston," he stammered. "He's hurt. Badly." But by the time the paramedics arrived, the security team had already reviewed the footage, or what little there was of it. The camera's position near the staircase had mysteriously glitched, a flash of static, a blank screen, then Gregory, already on the ground. It was a digital black hole at the worst possible moment. The police arrived with questions that felt more like accusations. "You were the only one in the building after the board meeting." "Yes," Nicholas replied, "but I didn't." "Did you argue with Mr. Langston?" "No, I barely spoke to him." It didn't matter. He was cuffed on the spot. The headline hit the morning news before Adaora back home could even reach him. "Immigrant janitor assaults tech billionaire. Motive unknown." Nicholas's pleas fell on deaf ears. His accent, his skin, his silence, all painted guilt before a trial could begin. Gregory lay in a coma, unable to speak, and the world was already convinced of Nicholas's crime. The media paraded his mugshot, digging up work records, twisting quotes. He wasn't Nicholas Okafor anymore. He was the immigrant who couldn't control his temper. And as he sat in that cold interrogation room, alone, handcuffed, humiliated, he wondered, would the truth even matter if no one wanted to hear it? The courtroom felt more like a stage than a place for justice. Nicholas sat stiffly beside a tired-looking public defender who barely glanced at him. No family in the gallery, no one to speak for him, just strangers, some whispering, some staring. The prosecution painted him as a bitter immigrant who had finally snapped. They said his politeness was a mask, that jealousy had pushed him over the edge. The glitch in the security footage? Coincidence. His late-night presence? Suspicious. Every word twisted until Nicholas barely recognized himself in their story. He was denied bail. A flight risk, they claimed. The judge didn't even meet his eyes when the gavel dropped. Back in Nigeria, Adaora was unraveling. She recorded tearful videos, pleading for her husband's innocence. She wrote to human rights organizations, shared Nicholas's story online, begged anyone who would listen. But the world moved on. 8 years, that was the sentence. 8 years behind cold walls, with 5 to be served before parole could even be considered. Prison was its own hell. Nicholas was one of the few black inmates in his wing. The guards watched him differently. The other inmates whispered. Some mocked, some shoved. Nights were the hardest, when silence grew claws and memories attacked. But he clung to the voice of his children, to Adaora's promises in her letters. He reread her words until the ink faded. Faith was the only fire he had left. And every day, Nicholas told himself, I will not die here, I must return. The file was thick, dusty, and nearly forgotten at the bottom of a digital archive, just another solved case. But something about it nagged at Megan Whitmore, a sharp-eyed junior investigator with a habit of asking questions her superiors avoided. 5 years had passed since the media frenzy dubbed it the immigrant assault scandal. But as Megan combed through the details, too many things didn't add up. Why was there no footage of the actual incident when all other cameras in the building worked perfectly before and after? Why did the internal reports barely mention Travis Blake, Gregory Langston's longtime personal assistant, who had vanished from corporate records shortly after the incident? Then she found it. A late-night building access log, signed off by Travis, manually edited just hours after the fall. Another internal memo surfaced, a heated exchange between Gregory and Travis about suspicious financial activity. Embezzlement, big money, covered tracks, and then silence. Megan took the findings to her supervisor, who brushed her off. It's an old case, the guy did his time, let it be. But she couldn't. She pushed harder. Quietly, she contacted Gregory Langston himself, now partially recovered from a coma and living in seclusion. To her surprise, the billionaire agreed to speak. The meeting was tense. Gregory looked thinner, older, haunted. Megan laid out her findings, ending with one question. Was Nicholas Okafor anywhere near you when you fell? Gregory's gaze darkened, his hands trembled, then he said the words no one expected. It wasn't him. His voice cracked as he remembered the final moments, Travis shouting, shoving, and then the blur of the fall. Megan recorded it all. It was enough. The truth finally painfully came to light. Nicholas Okafor had spent 5 years behind bars for a crime he never committed. Because of fear, because of color, because no one had bothered to ask. The prison gates creaked open, like the jaws of a beast finally letting go of its prey. Nicholas Okafor stepped into the sunlight, blinking against its brightness. No handcuffs, no guards, just freedom. And 5 years too late. The media swarmed him instantly. Microphones, cameras, flashbulbs. Reporters shouted questions like machine gun fire. Nicholas, how does it feel? Do you forgive Gregory Langston? He didn't answer. Not yet. He was too busy breathing air that didn't smell like bleach and fear. Too busy looking at the sky and imagining his daughter's face. Headlines spun overnight. Man wrongly jailed in billionaire scandal. Suddenly, Nicholas was a trending topic, a sympathetic figure, a human interest story with ratings potential. But none of it mattered to him. A week later, Gregory Langston, thinner now and leaning on a cane, hosted a public apology dinner at a 5-star hotel. Cameras rolled, a live stream buzzed. Gregory stood and offered a statement, voice cracking. I wronged a man who wanted nothing more than a better life. I believed lies, and I let the system destroy him. Then came the check, millions, signed, sealed. Gregory extended it across the table. Nicholas didn't even flinch. He looked at the cameras, then back at Gregory. You can't pay for 5 years of my children's lives I missed. You can't buy back the nights they cried or the years they learned to grow without a father. Gasps rippled through the room. He placed the check back on the table, calm, unbending. I want my life, not your money. And in that moment, as Gregory looked away in shame, and the cameras captured Nicholas standing with nothing but his dignity intact, he became something far greater than a victim. He became a man who refused to be bought. The wheels touched down on Nigerian soil, and the plane trembled slightly beneath Nicholas Okafor, as if sensing the weight of what he carried. His heart pounded. Not from fear, but from something deeper. The promise of home, the ache of time lost. As he stepped out of the airport terminal into the thick Lagos air, he scanned the crowd with eyes that had seen too much. Then he saw her, Adaora, arms open, tears streaming. Behind her, their 2 children, older than he remembered, ran forward with cries that broke whatever strength he had left. He dropped to his knees, engulfing them in an embrace that felt like resurrection. Adaora clutched his face, as if trying to memorize it all over again. You came back, she whispered, breathless. The streets of their community were lined with neighbors, some waving banners, others clapping with quiet reverence. A few wept, remembering how hard Adaora fought when the world wrote Nicholas off. They had lost 5 years, but they had gained something else, a story that belonged to them now, one of survival, dignity, and return. Weeks later, Nicholas stood outside a modest 1-story building with bold letters painted above the door. Justice Corner, legal aid for the wrongly accused. Inside, volunteers sorted case files and answered phones. The funding had come not from Langston's fortune, but from human rights groups and everyday people who believed in Nicholas's mission. A reporter approached him, mic in hand. Why come back, she asked. Nicholas glanced at his family through the window, then turned to her with calm conviction. I left to give my children hope, he said. I came back to show them courage. The afternoon sun cast a warm, golden hue over the quiet street in Lagos. Nicholas sat on a wooden bench just outside his new legal aid office, a gentle breeze brushing against his shirt. His eyes were fixed on the sight that made everything make sense, his 2 children laughing wildly as they chased each other around a mango tree, their laughter echoing like music across the courtyard. It was a sound he hadn't heard in 5 years. He reached for the stack of envelopes on the small table beside him, flipping through until his eyes paused on one. White, crisp, foreign. The logo in the corner made his brows rise slightly. It was from Geneva, an invitation. He opened it slowly. You are hereby invited to deliver a keynote speech at the International Human Rights Forum. As a symbol of resilience and justice, his fingers brushed over the words. They were heavy with meaning. Once upon a time, he would have read this with trembling hope. But today, he smiled gently and folded the letter with care. Not today, he murmured. Today is for healing. Inside the office behind him, where volunteers were wrapping up for the day, a photo hung in a simple black frame. It was a picture of Nicholas in prison, eyes tired, hands cuffed. But beneath it, someone had placed a handwritten note. He endured. He rose. Nicholas leaned back, closing his eyes, the sun warming his face as the laughter of his children danced around him. Peace, at last.